Nobody saw this coming. Not the audience, not Stephen Colbert, and definitely not Prince Harry himself. In the middle of a live interview, the Duke of Sussex stood up, took off his mic, and walked out. What triggered the walk-off? Was it a breakdown or a bold boundary? This moment shook the internet, and you're about to see why. In a moment that shocked fans around the world and instantly went viral, Prince Harry abruptly stormed off the set of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. What began as a routine promotional interview took a sudden, dramatic turn, leaving the host visibly stunned, the audience in total silence, and social media ablaze with speculation. The Duke of Sussex had appeared on the show to talk about his recent projects, including his best-selling memoir Spare, and his ongoing efforts around mental health awareness and veteran support. But what unfolded live on air was anything but a promotional moment. Instead, viewers witnessed an awkward and increasingly heated exchange between Harry and Colbert, one that spiraled far beyond lighthearted late-night banter. At first, everything seemed normal. Harry entered with his usual confident smile, warmly greeted the host, and exchanged a few laughs with the crowd. Dressed sharply in a tailored gray suit, he appeared calm, collected, and ready to engage. Colbert, known for his witty charm and quick-fire questions, kicked things off playfully. The two shared some jokes, touched on Harry's life in California, and even briefly discussed royal traditions. But that calm didn't last long. Within minutes, Colbert began steering the conversation into deeper waters, territory that Harry has repeatedly said he finds uncomfortable when not on his own terms. One of the first red flags came when Colbert jokingly asked, "Do you ever regret making your private life this public?" It drew laughs from the audience, but Harry's smile tightened. He responded cautiously, "There's a difference between privacy and control. Sharing my story doesn't mean giving up my boundaries." It was a clear signal, but Colbert didn't back off. He followed up with a more pointed remark. "Some say you've swapped one palace for another, only this one's made of Hollywood lights and Netflix cameras." The mood in the studio began to shift. You could feel the energy drop. The once playful interview had become tense. Harry's tone changed, and his responses grew shorter, more defensive. Still, Colbert continued, perhaps trying to strike a balance between humor and journalism. He made another quip. "Maybe all this royal drama could be settled over a group hug with King Charles?" That was the tipping point. Harry, visibly frustrated, leaned forward, removed his microphone, and looked straight at Colbert. What he said wasn't aggressive, but it was cold and clear. "This isn't funny to me. I didn't come here to be mocked." The studio audience froze. Colbert, clearly caught off guard, attempted to salvage the moment with a nervous laugh. But it was too late. Harry stood up, gave a quick nod to the crowd, and walked off stage. The cameras cut awkwardly. Colbert, staying composed, said to the viewers, "Well, that's our time, folks." But his face told another story. Surprise, perhaps regret, maybe even concern. Clips of the walk-off hit social media within minutes. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok exploded with reactions. Hashtag Prince Harry, hashtag Colbert Clash, and hashtag Royal Walk-Off began trending worldwide. Some users joked that the moment was better than Netflix, while others criticized Colbert for pushing too far. Meanwhile, fans of Harry defended his walkout, pointing out that mental health, family trauma, and public pressure aren't punchlines. Back in the studio, sources say the crew was shaken. One insider reported, "Nobody thought he would actually leave. We've had tense interviews before, but this was different. It was personal." Media outlets scrambled to get statements from both sides. The palace gave no comment, while Harry's spokesperson later released a brief statement. Prince Harry felt that the conversation was no longer respectful and chose to exit the interview to protect his emotional well-being. Whether you view his walk-off as a sign of strength or a public relations blunder, the moment marks yet another dramatic chapter in Prince Harry's complex relationship with the media. Once known as the fun royal, he has since transformed into one of the most polarizing figures of the modern monarchy, pushed between privacy, personal truth, and public expectation. And as this latest moment proves, navigating fame, especially royal fame, is never easy, especially when the cameras are rolling and the questions hit a little too close to home. Prince Harry arrived on the set of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert with all the confidence of a seasoned public figure. The Duke of Sussex was all smiles as he stepped onto the stage, waving to the audience and shaking hands with crew members and Colbert himself. He looked relaxed, even cheerful, dressed in a crisp gray suit over a dark navy shirt, ready to charm viewers around the world. The crowd welcomed him with enthusiastic applause. After all, this wasn't just a former royal on the show. This was Prince Harry, the once rebellious prince turned global advocate, author, and Netflix producer. The expectations were high for a fun, engaging conversation. Stephen Colbert greeted him with his signature mix of wit and warmth. "Ladies and gentlemen," he joked, "our next guest left the palace, found freedom, and still managed to be more famous than any of us, Prince Harry." The crowd laughed. Harry smiled. The beginning of the interview was lighthearted. Colbert offered Harry a drink, and they shared a few laughs about American culture, the differences in royal life, and even poked fun at the British press. The audience seemed to enjoy the playful energy between the two, and everything pointed to a smooth interview. But that all changed quickly. Colbert, known for pushing the envelope with clever, often politically charged humor, started moving into more sensitive territory. He began referencing Spare, Harry's explosive memoir that dives deep into his struggles with the royal family, his grief over Princess Diana, his mental health journey, and his decision to step back from royal duties. It started subtly. "Your book has been a massive success," Colbert said, "but it's also made headlines for all the royalty you spilled. Do you ever read those headlines and think, maybe I should have kept a few secrets?" The audience laughed. Even Harry chuckled at first, nodding slightly and replying, "You know, it's funny. People have had decades to tell my story for me. I figured it was time to tell it myself." A solid response, measured, thoughtful, confident. But Colbert didn't stop there. He pushed further, this time with a tone that mixed humor and seriousness. "Do you ever regret airing so much family drama in public? I mean, some people think it's all a bit. Oprah, Netflix, and now a tell-all book. It's a lot." This time, Harry didn't laugh. His smile faded slowly, and the atmosphere shifted. What had been a friendly chat was now veering into uncomfortable territory. You could almost feel the tension in the room thickening. Harry took a breath and paused before responding. He looked Colbert straight in the eye and said, "It's not about drama. It's about truth. There's a big difference." The crowd fell silent. Colbert leaned back slightly, surprised by the seriousness in Harry's tone. Harry continued, more assertively now. "For most of my life, everything I did was filtered through headlines. People wrote their version of me without ever knowing me. I wrote that book so people could understand what I've actually been through, from my own perspective." Colbert nodded slowly, sensing that he'd touched a nerve. Still, in true late-night fashion, he tried to lighten the mood with a grin. "Fair enough, but come on, every family has issues. Just not all of them end up in hardcover." Another attempt at humor, but it didn't land. Harry smirked, but it was forced. The audience chuckled nervously. The ease of the earlier conversation had vanished. It was now clear to everyone, viewers, audience members, and even Colbert, that this was no longer just an interview. It was personal. The segment continued, but the vibe had undeniably changed. Harry's posture stiffened. His answers became shorter. The playfulness was gone. He was no longer the relaxed, smiling guest who had walked on stage minutes earlier. The exchange, though not a full-on argument, had created a visible rift between guest and host. And while Harry remained composed, it was clear he was not happy with the direction things had taken. Behind the scenes, sources would later say that Harry felt blindsided by the questions and had expected a lighter, less confrontational segment. Others claimed Colbert was simply doing his job, asking what the public was thinking. Either way, what was supposed to be a promotional appearance quickly became an awkward, uncomfortable moment that neither side seemed prepared for. What made it even more striking was the audience's reaction, going from laughs to silence, unsure of whether they were witnessing live television or live tension. It was the kind of moment that late-night TV rarely captures anymore, unscripted, raw, and deeply revealing. And it was far from over. The tension had been building slowly, like a kettle just about to boil. But the moment that truly cracked the calm came when Stephen Colbert asked the one question that struck a nerve with Prince Harry, a question that felt less like a joke and more like a challenge. "Some people think you traded your royal privacy for Netflix deals and bestsellers," Colbert said with his usual smirk. "Is that freedom or just a different kind of spotlight?" It was meant to sound clever. The studio audience gave a quick, uncertain laugh, half amusement, half discomfort. But Harry didn't smile. He didn't blink. His body shifted slightly in his seat, and for the first time in the entire interview, his confident composure began to crack. There was a long pause, the kind of silence that doesn't usually happen on late-night television. Then came Harry's reply, sharp, firm, and unfiltered. "I didn't trade anything," he snapped, his voice noticeably colder. "I'm speaking my truth. There's a difference between being silenced and choosing to speak." The words echoed in the studio, and the mood immediately changed. Gone was the charming, cheeky prince the audience had welcomed minutes earlier. In his place was someone clearly frustrated, someone who had had enough of being questioned, misunderstood, or reduced to a headline. Colbert, sensing the discomfort in the room, quickly tried to shift gears. He chuckled nervously and reached for a safer question. "Well, all right then," he said, gesturing toward Harry's book on the table. "Let's talk about the alpaca farm you mentioned in Chapter 4. But Harry wasn't having it. His answers from that point on grew noticeably shorter. The warmth had drained from his voice, replaced by a clipped, matter-of-fact tone. He sat straighter, more guarded, his eyes no longer scanning the audience or smiling at jokes. He was done playing along. The tension was now impossible to ignore. The once engaged audience fell quiet. Occasional laughter from earlier had disappeared entirely. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. What started as a light-hearted conversation now felt like a public unraveling, a live therapy session that had gone off script and off the rails. Behind the scenes, producers reportedly panicked. The show's timing was getting thrown off, and the energy had plummeted. But no one could stop what was unfolding. This wasn't just about promoting a book anymore. This was about pain, perception, and a man trying to defend his truth in real time, under studio lights. Colbert gave it one last try to soften the tone. He smiled and said, "You know, I think people admire your honesty, even if they don't always understand it." Harry nodded but didn't speak. The silence that followed was heavy, and that's when it became clear to everyone watching, whether in the studio or later online, that this wasn't just an awkward moment. It was a statement. Prince Harry wasn't angry just because of a question. He was angry at the years of judgment, the accusations of attention-seeking, the way his every word was analyzed, twisted, and turned into clickbait. He wasn't mad at Colbert alone. He was mad at the whole system, because to Harry, speaking publicly wasn't selling out. It was survival. Taking control of his story wasn't betrayal. It was the only way he could heal. Unfortunately, that kind of vulnerability doesn't always land well in a comedy format. As the segment neared its end, Harry barely looked at Colbert. He thanked him, but without much feeling. The two shook hands, but the air between them was noticeably frosty. The final applause from the audience was polite, but not enthusiastic. They knew they had just witnessed something raw, real, and deeply uncomfortable. After the taping, insiders reported that Harry left the studio without taking any backstage photos or greeting staff, a move highly unusual for celebrity guests. Some say he was visibly upset. Others said he simply wanted to leave and avoid further press. Clips of the interview flooded social media almost instantly. Viewers were split. Some criticized Harry, saying he was too sensitive and couldn't handle simple questions. Others fiercely defended him, pointing out that constant media scrutiny, especially about family trauma, isn't something anyone should have to laugh off for entertainment. What's certain is this: the interview didn't go the way anyone expected. Not Harry, not Colbert, and definitely not the audience. And in a world where every royal moment is managed and polished, this one stood out for its raw, unscripted honesty. Whether you call it a meltdown, a media misstep, or a much-needed moment of truth, it's clear this was more than just a late-night interview. It was a breaking point, and everyone felt it. As the tension in the studio grew thicker, the air more uneasy, and the crowd quieter, Stephen Colbert made one last attempt to save the moment. With a nervous chuckle and the hint of a smirk, he quipped, "Maybe you and King Charles just need a good group hug." It was the kind of joke that might have landed in any other interview, but not this one. That did it. Prince Harry's demeanor shifted instantly. He leaned forward, slowly, deliberately. The smile that had long disappeared was replaced with a look of quiet intensity. He removed his microphone with a firm hand and looked Stephen Colbert directly in the eye. "This isn't funny to me. I didn't come here to be mocked." There was no yelling, no dramatic outburst, just a quiet, cold truth that hit harder than any insult. The room fell completely silent. Harry stood up, gave a brief, respectful nod to the stunned studio audience, and walked off stage, live on air. No music, no cue, just the sound of his footsteps fading as he exited the set. Colbert, visibly rattled, sat frozen for a moment before forcing a thin smile and turning back to the audience. "Well, I guess that's our time, folks," he said, attempting to inject humor into the tension. But the line fell flat. There was no laughter, just a wave of disbelief spreading across the room. Backstage, chaos reportedly erupted. Crew members scrambled to figure out what had just happened. Producers whispered frantically into headsets. PR teams began typing furiously on their phones. No one had anticipated a guest of this stature, a royal, walking off live television. And outside the studio, the world caught fire. Within minutes, clips of the walk-off exploded across social media. The raw footage, captured by audience members and quickly shared by entertainment accounts, was everywhere, on Instagram Reels, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube Shorts. The hashtags #HarryWalkOff, #ColbertClash, and #Royal Meltdown were trending in less than 10 minutes. Some people couldn't believe what they'd seen. Others replayed the clip on loop. Opinions were split. Loudly, "He overreacted," some commented. "It's a comedy show. He needs thicker skin." Colbert was out of line, others argued. "You don't invite someone on your show and make a joke out of their trauma." Within hours, news sites across the globe published headlines like, "Prince Harry storms off set after Colbert joke goes too far. Late-night interview turns into royal drama." Literally. Is Harry done with TV appearances for good? The backlash and support was swift and loud. Supporters of Harry were quick to defend him. They pointed out that his past with the royal family and the media wasn't a punchline, it was pain. They reminded people that his memoir wasn't just gossip, it was a deeply personal account of trauma, loss, and healing. Critics, however, labeled him as sensitive, even self-righteous. They argued that if you write a book, appear in documentaries, and take part in interviews, you have to expect hard questions, even some uncomfortable jokes. But what no one could deny was that this moment had hit a nerve, not just with Harry, but with the public at large. Because this wasn't just about a late-night joke. It was about a man who had spent most of his life under a microscope, now trying to control his narrative, only to find himself once again on the defensive. And maybe, just maybe, this was the moment he decided he'd had enough. Sources later confirmed that Harry left the studio immediately after exiting the stage. No backstage interviews, no chats with the crew, no photo ops, just straight out the door and into a waiting car. Colbert, for his part, remained silent for the rest of the show. No further jokes, no attempt to explain what had happened. Whether out of respect or damage control, he moved on. The show's producers released a short statement the next morning, calling the segment unplanned and unscripted, and declining further comment. Harry's team later issued a more direct response. Prince Harry appeared on The Late Show to discuss his work and advocacy. He did not anticipate being the subject of humor regarding deeply personal matters. And just like that, a planned 12-minute interview meant to promote a book turned into one of the most talked-about royal moments of the year. Late-night TV has had its fair share of unexpected walkouts, but none quite like this. Not from a prince, not in front of a global audience, and certainly not in a way that left everyone asking, was it just a joke or something much deeper? Social media exploded. The moment Prince Harry walked off the set of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert spread like wildfire across every platform. What had started as a tense late-night interview had now become a global media spectacle. Within hours, hashtags like hashtag Prince Harry, hashtag Colbert Clash, hashtag Royal Meltdown were trending worldwide on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Clips of the awkward exchange and abrupt exit were edited, captioned, and shared across millions of feeds. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. TikTok creators mimicked the walk-off with dramatic flair. Twitter lit up with memes, some hilarious, some biting, and many uncomfortable in their honesty. One meme showed Colbert with a crown photoshopped on his head, captioned, "When you dethrone a prince in under 10 minutes." Another read, "Prince Harry, I'm here to heal." Colbert, "Let's joke about your dad." Harry, victory hand, but not all reactions were comedic. A large segment of the internet was deeply divided. Some accused Colbert of crossing a line, suggesting that the host, known for his sharp tongue, had purposely pushed Harry into a corner for ratings and controversy. They argued that inviting a guest on your show, especially someone who has openly spoken about mental health, loss, and trauma, comes with a level of responsibility. He wasn't there to be roasted. One fan tweeted, "He was there to talk about his book. That's not comedy material, it's therapy." Others, however, saw things differently. Critics slammed Harry for being overly sensitive, suggesting that someone who willingly releases a memoir, signs high-profile streaming deals, and does interviews around the world should be prepared for hard questions, and maybe even a few jokes. He wants the spotlight on his terms only. One viral post read, "You don't get to do Oprah, Netflix, and a best-selling memoir, and then walk off when someone jokes about it." Even major media outlets couldn't resist weighing in. From BBC and Sky News in the UK to CNN and Variety in the US, headlines speculated everything from publicity stunt to emotional breakdown. Pundits debated whether the segment had been staged to create buzz for the show, or whether Harry had simply reached a breaking point in front of millions. Some questioned the vetting process. Was Harry fully aware of what Colbert might ask? Did Colbert's team promise a safe, respectful interview? Or did the show intentionally push boundaries to create a viral moment? Insiders offered conflicting accounts. One anonymous producer told a media outlet, "This wasn't supposed to go like this. We had a roadmap, and Colbert went off script." Harry wasn't briefed on that line of questioning. Others close to the production claimed Harry's team had been overly controlling during prep, insisting on certain questions, refusing others, and demanding final say on segment edits. If true, this only added fuel to the theory that the entire interview was a tightrope walk from the start. Meanwhile, Harry's fans came to his defense loudly. They pointed out his years of trauma, the death of his mother, the intrusive tabloid culture in the UK, his military service, and the emotional distance he experienced within the royal household. For many of them, his decision to walk away wasn't a meltdown. It was a boundary being drawn in real time, something we rarely see from public figures on such a massive stage. He didn't overreact, one user wrote. He responded like a human being who's had enough. Mental health advocates also weighed in, using the moment as a conversation starter. Posts circulated about respecting emotional limits, the ethics of entertainment, and the price of public vulnerability. For some, the viral walk-off was more than just gossip. It was a mirror reflecting how we treat pain in the spotlight. On the other side, comedians and talk show hosts debated whether late-night TV was losing its edge in an era where every joke could be a trigger. Some suggested this might make guests warier of appearing on shows like Colbert's. Others worried it would lead to more censorship and less authenticity in future celebrity interviews. By the next morning, talk shows, morning programs, and YouTube commentators had all chimed in. The headlines kept coming. So did the speculation. And while the public remained split, one thing was absolutely certain. Nobody was talking about anything else. What was supposed to be a simple promotional interview for a memoir had turned into a cultural moment, part scandal, part social commentary, part very public therapy session. Was it a misstep, a wake-up call, or a bold act of emotional self-respect? Only time will tell. But one thing is clear. In a world obsessed with controlling the narrative, Prince Harry just reminded everyone that sometimes walking away speaks louder than words. Hours after the broadcast aired, the world was still buzzing. Social media was ablaze. News outlets ran constant replays of the moment. Commentators on every platform debated what it all meant, not just for Prince Harry, but for celebrity culture, media ethics, and the power of emotional boundaries. And then came the official word. In a calm but pointed statement, Prince Harry's spokesperson broke the silence. Prince Harry felt that the interview took an unexpected turn and chose to remove himself from the situation to maintain his mental and emotional well-being. Simple, direct, firm, no apologies, no over-explanation, just a clear declaration of self-protection. That statement echoed with a growing segment of people who had watched the clip and felt uncomfortable with how the interview played out. To them, this wasn't about drama or ratings. It was about a public figure choosing peace over provocation and doing it unapologetically. But what about Colbert? Stephen Colbert's team didn't offer an apology either. There was no lengthy public statement, no damage control interview, and no real acknowledgement beyond a few behind-the-scenes leaks. One source close to the production simply stated that, going forward, future interviews may avoid deeply personal themes unless mutually agreed upon. In other words, producers may now think twice before letting spontaneity override sensitivity. But the real question looms large. Where does this leave Prince Harry? Depending on who you ask, the answer varies wildly. To some, this moment solidifies his image as a vulnerable, misunderstood royal trying to find his footing in a media world that often turns pain into spectacle. They argue this was just another example of Harry being cornered, misunderstood, and publicly scrutinized for being human. To them, the walk-off was a brave act of self-preservation, a man drawing a line in the sand after years of being expected to smile through discomfort, trauma, and pressure. One fan tweeted, "He didn't walk off because he's weak. He walked off because he's done letting people turn his life into entertainment." Others, however, saw it differently. Critics argue that if Harry wants to live in the public eye, especially as an author, a documentarian, and a media figure, he must be prepared for the realities of the spotlight. They claim that this incident shows he's not ready for unscripted moments, that he struggles when conversations drift away from carefully curated talking points. Some even speculate that this might affect future press opportunities or how networks choose to handle celebrity interviews moving forward. Is Harry building boundaries or walls? That's a question now dividing fans, media analysts, and even mental health advocates. And while opinions differ, one thing is crystal clear. This moment, raw, unpredictable, and deeply human, has added yet another chapter to the already complex story of Prince Harry's post-royal life. It's not the first time Harry has made headlines for an emotional reaction, and it likely won't be the last. From Oprah's iconic interview with Meghan, to their Netflix documentary series, to the raw confessions in Spare, Harry has made it clear. He's done being silent. But as many have pointed out, speaking out is one thing. Handling backlash in real time is another. Navigating modern fame is no easy feat. It's a landscape filled with viral moments, instant judgment, and very little room for error. For someone like Harry, who grew up inside the gilded cage of royalty, adapting to the rules of today's media jungle might just be the biggest challenge of all. Yet, ironically, that's also what makes people watch. Because in an age of curated perfection, Harry remains one of the few global figures whose every flaw, reaction, and outburst feels real. Messy? Sometimes. Polarizing? Definitely. But real? Unmistakably. And that, perhaps more than anything, is why this story resonates. Because beyond the royal titles, Netflix contracts, and headline-grabbing interviews, there's something deeply relatable about a man who simply says, "Enough." So what's next? Will Harry lay low after this moment? Will Colbert address the situation in a future episode? Will networks become more cautious when booking high-profile guests with sensitive pasts? Time will tell. But as the dust settles and the internet cools off, one thing remains unchanged. The world is watching, closer than ever, more judgmental than ever, and perhaps, just maybe, more empathetic than it's ever been. For now. Prince Harry walks forward in that spotlight, not as a perfect media figure, but as someone navigating an impossibly complex world, one unscripted moment at a time. Whether you side with Harry or think he overreacted, one thing is undeniable. This wasn't just another piece of celebrity drama. It wasn't a PR stunt. It wasn't just a bad interview. And it definitely wasn't something the world would forget by morning. This moment was raw, uncomfortable, and above all, deeply human. And maybe that's exactly why it hit so hard. In a world where public figures are trained to smile through the pain, to laugh off difficult questions, and to deliver picture-perfect sound bites, no matter what's thrown at them, Prince Harry did something we rarely see. He broke the script. Right in front of a live audience, millions of viewers, and a late-night host who's made a career out of pushing the limits of comedy, Harry said, "No more." He took off his mic, stood up, and walked out. Not with drama, not with theatrics, but with a kind of quiet finality that made the entire room, and soon, the entire internet go still. Was it awkward? Yes. Uncomfortable? Very. Unprofessional? Some say so. But it was also something else. It was real. And in today's world of filtered faces, polished PR teams, and media coaching, real is rare. That's what made this moment different. Because behind the royal title, behind the memoir and the Netflix documentaries, behind the controversial interviews and endless headlines, is a man. A man who lost his mother in one of the most public tragedies in modern history. A man who's been hounded by tabloids, betrayed by those closest to him, and torn between duty and personal truth. A man who is still trying to understand who he is now that he stepped away from the institution that defined his entire identity. So when he felt a line had been crossed, he didn't stay silent. He didn't laugh it off. He didn't smile and play the game. He walked away. And whether you think that was strong or sensitive, calculated or clumsy, it was undeniably human. That's what people are responding to. It's not just about who was right or wrong. It's about the fact that, in that moment, we saw something real happen on television, a place where so little feels genuine anymore. And that's why social media couldn't stop talking about it. Not just because it was shocking, but because it was relatable. How many times have we been in a situation, at work, at school, with friends or family, where a conversation suddenly turned, and we felt our heart rate spike, where we smiled through discomfort because we felt we had to, where we wanted to walk away but didn't, because we were afraid of what people would think. Prince Harry did what most people wish they could do in moments like that. He didn't yell. He didn't insult. He just said, with his actions, "I'm done here." For some, that looked like weakness. For others, it looked like boundaries. But for everyone watching, it looked like something real in a sea of scripted celebrity nonsense. And that's why the moment blew up, because it reminded us that beneath the titles, the fame, and the controversies, Harry is still someone figuring it out, just like the rest of us. Someone who's tired, someone who's been pushed, someone who's maybe still healing. And when you look at it that way, this wasn't about Colbert, or the show, or the question that went too far. It was about one man's decision to finally stop smiling for the camera when it didn't feel right anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most honest thing we've seen on television in a very long time. So whether you're a fan of Prince Harry or not, whether you think he overreacted or stood up for himself, this moment mattered. It wasn't just awkward. It wasn't just viral. It wasn't just a meme. It was a flash of truth in an industry built on illusion. And in a time where most people only show the best parts of themselves, online or on camera, watching someone walk away rather than betray their peace, that's not weakness. That's power. And maybe that's why the world can't stop talking about it. So what do you think? Did Prince Harry do the right thing? Or did things just spiral out of control? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This conversation is far from over. If you found this story interesting, raw, or even just thought-provoking, don't forget to give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more real, unscripted celebrity moments and deep dives like this one, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.